The history of the Philippines is marked by the creation of the Laguna Copperplate Inscription, the first written document found in a Philippine language. The inscription itself identifies the date of its creation as the year 900. Prior to its discovery in 1989, the earliest record of the Philippine Islands corresponded with the arrival of Ferdinand Magellan in 1521. The discovery of the LCI thus extended the record of Philippine history back by 600 years. After 900, the early history of territories and nation-states prior to being present-day Philippines is known through archeological findings and records of contacts with other civilizations such as Song Dynasty China and Brunei. This article covers the history of the Philippines from the creation of the Laguna Copperplate inscription in 900 AD to the arrival of European explorer Ferdinand Magellan in 1521, which marks the beginning of the Philippine Colonial period. The Laguna Copperplate inscription and its context. In 1989, Antun Pasma deciphered the text of the Laguna Copperplate inscription at the National Museum of the Philippines and discovered that it identified the date of its creation as the year of circa 822, month of Basorqua. According to Jyotisha, this corresponded with the year 900 AD. Prior to the deciphering of the LCI, Philippine history was traditionally considered to begin at 1521, with the arrival of Magellan and his chronicler, Antonio Pigafetta. History could not be derived from pre-colonial records because such records typically did not survive. Most of the writing was done on perishable bamboo or leaves. Because the deciphering of the LCI made it out to be the earliest written record of the islands that would later become the Philippines, the LCI reset the traditional boundaries between Philippine history and prehistory, placing the demarcation line 600 years earlier. The inscription forgives the descendants of Namaran from a debt of 926.4 grams of gold, and is granted by the chief of Tondo and the authorities of Pala, Binangan and Pulilan, which are all locations in Luzon. The words are a mixture of Sanskrit, Old Malay, Old Javanese and Old Tagalog. The subject matter proves that a developed society existed in the Philippines prior to the Spanish colonization, as well as refuting earlier claims of the Philippines being a cultural isolate in Asia. The references to the chief of Medang Kingdom in Indonesia imply that there were cultural and trade links with empires and territories in other parts of maritime Southeast Asia, particularly Srivijaya. Thus, aside from clearly indicating the presence of writing and of written records at the time, the LCI effectively links the cultural developments in the Philippines at the time with the growth of a thalassocratic civilization in Southeast Asia. Barangay city-states and thalassocracy. Since at least the 3rd century, the indigenous peoples were in contact with other Southeast Asian and East Asian nations. Fragmented ethnic groups established numerous city-states formed by the assimilation of several small political units known as barangay, each headed by a dachu, who was then answerable to a Raja, who headed the city-state. Each barangay consisted of about 100 families. Some barangays were big, such as Ubu, Butuan, Mactan, Irong, Bigan, and Slerong. Each of these big barangays had a population of more than 2,000. Even scattered barangays, through the development of inter-island and international trade, became more culturally homogeneous by the 4th century. Hindu-Buddhist culture and religion flourished among the noblemen in this era. By the 9th century, a highly developed society had already established several hierarchies with set professions: the dachu or ruling class, the maharlika or nobleman, the timawan or freeman, and the dependent class, which is divided into two, the aliping namamahay and aliping sagwagilid. Many of the barangay were, to varying extents, under the de jure jurisprudence of one of several neighboring empires, among them the Malay Srivijaya, Javanese Majapahit, Brunei, Malacca empires, although de facto had established their own independent system of rule. Trading links with Sumatra, Borneo, Thailand, Java, China, India, Arabia, Japan and the Ryukyu Kingdom flourished during this era. A thalassocracy had thus emerged based on international trade. In the earliest times, the items which were prized by the people included jars, which were a symbol of wealth throughout South Asia, and later metal, salt and tobacco. In exchange, the people would trade feathers, rhino horn, hornbill beaks, beeswax, birds' nests, resin, rattan. In the period between the 7th century to the beginning of the 15th century, numerous prosperous centers of trade had emerged, including the Kingdom of Namayan, which flourished alongside Manila Bay, Cebu, Iloilo, Butuan, the Kingdom of Sanfitsi situated in Pangasinan, the kingdoms of Sabag and Wak-Wak situated in Pampanga and Aparay. The emergence of Baybayin and related scripts. The script used in writing down the LCI's Kawi, which originated in Java, and was used across much of maritime Southeast Asia. But by at least the 13th century or 14th century, its descendant known in Tagalog as Baybayin was in regular use. The term Baybayin literally means syllables, and the writing system itself is a member of the Brahmic family. One example of the use of Baybayin from that time period was found on an earthenware burial jar found in Batangas. Though a common perception is that Baybayin replaced Kawi, many historians believe that they were used alongside each other. Baybayin was noted by the Spanish to be known by everyone, and was generally used for personal and trivial writings. Kawi most likely continued to be used for official documents and writings by the ruling class. Baybayin was simpler and easier to learn, but Kawi was more advanced and better suited for concise writing. Although Kawi came to be replaced by the Latin script, Baybayin continued to be used during the Spanish colonization of the Philippines up until the late 19th century. Closely related scripts still in use among indigenous peoples today include Hanuna Cubed O, Bayad, and Tagbinwa. Chinese trade. The earliest date suggested for direct Chinese contact with the Philippines was 982 AD. At the time, merchants from Ma'ai brought their wares to Guangzhou. This was noted by the Sungshi by Ma Tuan-lin, who compiled it with other historical records in the Wenxian Tao Euro unregistered trademark Unka Euro unregistered trademark O at the time around the transition between the Sung and Yuan dynasties. However, actual trade between China and the Proto-Philippine states probably started much earlier. The growth of Islamic sultanates. In 1380, Makhdum Karam, the first Islamic missionary to the Philippines, brought Islam to the archipelago. Subsequent visits of Arab, Malay and Javanese missionaries helped strengthen the Islamic faith of the Filipinos, most of whom would later become Christian under the Spanish colonization. The Sultanate of Sulu, the largest Islamic kingdom in the islands, encompassed parts of Indonesia, Malaysia and the Philippines. The royal house of the Sultanate claimed descent from the Prophet Muhammad. Around 1405, the year that the war over succession ended in the Majapahit Empire, Sufi traders introduced Islam into the Hindu-Malayan empires, and for about the next century the southern half of Luzon and the islands south of it were subject to the various Muslim sultanates of Borneo. During this period, the Japanese established a trading post at Aparay and maintained a loose sway over northern Luzon. Attack by Sultanate of Brunei. Around the year 1500 AD, the Kingdom of Brunei under Sultan Balkian attacked the Kingdom of Tondo and established a city with the Malay name of Slerong on the opposite bank of Pasig River. The traditional Rajas of Tondo, the Lakhanjala, retained their titles and property, but the real political power came to reside in the House of Solomon, the Rajas of Manila. Expansion of trade. Jokano refers to the time between the 1st and 14th century AD as the Philippines' emergent phase. It was characterized by intensive trading, and saw the rise of definable social organization, and, among the more progressive communities, the rise of certain dominant cultural patterns. The advancements that brought this period were made possible by the increased use of iron tools, which allowed such stable patterns to form. This era also saw the development of writing. The first surviving written artifact from the Philippines, now known as the Laguna Copperplate Inscription, was written in 900 AD, marking the end of what is considered Philippine prehistory and heralding the earliest phase of Philippine history, that of the time between the first written artifact in 900 AD and the arrival of colonial powers in 1521. The Spanish Conquista. Filipino historians note an overlap in the history of pre-colonial Philippines and the Spanish colonial period, noting that while Magellan's arrival in 1521 marked the first arrival of European colonizers to this country, It was not until the arrival of Miguel Pez de Legazpi in 1565 that the Europeans had any marked impact on the lifestyle of the residents of the Philippine archipelago. National Historical Institute and National Commission for Culture and the Arts Chair Ambeth Ocampo notes, contrary to popular belief, the so-called Euro Spanish period in Philippine history does not begin with Magellan unregistered trademark's arrival in Cebu and his well-deserved death in the Battle of Mactan in 1521. Magellan may have planted a cross and left the Santo near ±0 with the wife of Humabon, but that is not a real Euro conquest or Euro conquest. The Spanish dominion over the islands to be known as a Euro Filipinas began only in 1565, with the arrival of Legazpi. From Cebu, Legazpi moved to other populated and, we presume, important native settlements like Funao and later Manila. Primary sources for early Philippine history. Primary sources for this period in Philippine history are sparse, which explains why so little is known. It is however, postulated that during the more than 300 years of Spain's colonization, Spanish authorities in the Philippines had successfully cleared through burning or burying written records and other documentaries that would establish proof of governance on the various existing small kingdoms and sultanates they subdued. This is evidenced by the Laguna Copperplate inscription written in copper metal sheet. The inscription writing in Kawi script manifests the existence of a developed writing system and government structure prior to the arrival of Spaniards and its subsequent establishment of Spanish colonies. The LCI is both the earliest local source on this era and the earliest primary source, with the Kalatagan jar being more or less contemporary, although the translation of the text on the jar is in some question. Early contacts with Japan, China, and by Muslim traders produced the next set of primary sources. Genealogical records by Muslim Filipinos who trace their family roots to this era constitute the next set of sources. Another short primary source concerns the attack by Brunei's King Balkian on Manila Bay in 1500. Finally, and perhaps with the most detail, Spanish chroniclers in the 17th century collected accounts and histories of that time, putting into writing the remembered history of the later part of this era, and noting the then extant cultural patterns which at that time had not yet been swept away by the coming tide of Hispanization. References